The alarm on my wrist did not beep. It screamed. 3 warships had dropped out of jump space above our station, and every single one of them belonged to her. I was halfway through fixing a coolant line in Bay 4 when the lights turned red, and my first thought was not fear, it was tiredness. Because I already knew who it was. Nobody else in this galaxy announces themselves by making the stars shake. My name is Owen Blake. I run cargo and repair contracts out of a rented dock on the edge of Concord space, a place so small it does not even have a proper name, just a number. I am not a soldier. I am not a diplomat. I fix engines and I mind my own business, and 3 times now, that has not been enough to keep the most powerful woman in the known galaxy away from my door. Her name is Threll Vailra, Empress of the Ascendancy, ruler of 11 systems and mother, so the stories say, of nothing, because she never needed an heir when she planned to live forever. The first time she came to me, I said no to her before she even finished her sentence. The second time, I said no with my hands shaking. The third time, I said no and lost someone I loved because of it. This is the story of the 4th time, and this time, she did not come to take anything from me, she came to stay. Let me take you back, so you understand why a small mechanic from a nameless station ever mattered to an empress at all. It started 2 years ago, on a night I was welding a hull patch and humming badly to myself, when a shuttle with no markings landed outside my dock, like it owned the ground it touched. I remember wiping grease off my hands and stepping outside expecting trouble. Maybe pirates, maybe a tax inspector, which around here was worse than pirates. Instead, I found a woman standing in the dust in a coat the color of deep space, watching me the way you watch something you have never seen before and cannot explain. She told me her name, she told me her title. I did not believe her, because empresses do not visit engine bays, and I told her so. She laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, it was surprised. Like laughing was a muscle she had not used in a long while. She said she had watched recordings of me arguing with a Concord trade officer over unfair fuel prices, refusing to back down even when he threatened to blacklist my whole station. She said humans confused her, because we had so little power and so much stubbornness, and she wanted to understand it up close. Then she offered me a place in her court. Advisor, she called it, though her guards standing behind her did not look like they were there to protect an advisor. They looked like they were there to make sure I said yes. I said no. I said it plainly. The way you decline a drink you do not want. She tilted her head, studied me for a long moment, and then simply left. No threat, no anger, just a long look, like she was memorizing my face for later. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The second time she came, 6 months later, she did not offer me a title. She offered me my home. By then, our little station was drowning in debt to a mining conglomerate that wanted our dock for scrap. She knew this. Of course she knew this. She told me that with one word from her, the debt would vanish, the conglomerate would back off, and every person on this station would sleep without fear for the first time in years. All I had to do was come with her. Not as a prisoner, she said. As hers. That word sat heavy in my chest. Hers. I looked past her, at my station, at the lights of homes I had known my whole life, at people who trusted me to keep this place running. And I thought about what it would mean to save them by becoming property, no matter how gently that property was treated. I told her that a home saved by giving away a person is not really saved at all. I told her no. Her jaw tightened that time. Her guards shifted, uneasy, like they had never watched anyone refuse her twice and lived to tell it calmly. She did not argue. She turned and walked back to her shuttle, and this time, before she left, she said something I did not understand until much later. She said, "You are the first thing in 300 years that has not bent when I pushed." Then she was gone, and the debt was still there, and I spent the next 4 months working myself half to death alongside my crew, doing it the hard way, the human way, until we paid it off ourselves. It nearly broke us, but it was ours. The third time was different. The third time was the one that cost me. She arrived with no warships this time, no announcement, just a single small craft, quiet as a held breath. I found her waiting near the old cargo lift, alone, no guards at all, which should have told me something was wrong before she even opened her mouth. She told me her court was pressing her to secure an alliance with humanity, and that the fastest way, the way her advisors demanded, was through marriage to a human of influence. She told me, without any of her usual composure, that she had told them there was only one human she would ever consider. She was not offering me power this time. She was offering herself. Rule beside her, she said, not beneath her. A true partnership. Her voice cracked slightly on the word partnership, like it was a foreign shape in her mouth. I stood there and felt something I had not expected, not flattery, fear. Because for the first time, some small, quiet part of me wanted to say yes, and that terrified me more than any warship ever could. I was afraid of what saying yes would turn me into. I was afraid of losing the person who kept refusing, the person who had built something small and real with his own two hands, and I could not tell if the fear was wisdom or cowardice. So I said no a third time, quietly, almost as a whisper, because it was the hardest one to say. She did not shout, she did not threaten, she simply nodded once, like she had expected it, and hated that she had expected it, and left. What I did not know was that some of the officers in her fleet did not share her patience. Word travels strangely in a galaxy this large, and somehow, my third refusal reached ears that saw it as an insult to the ascendancy itself, not just to her. 3 weeks later, a mining freighter with false papers drifted too close to our station and disabled our shield grid before anyone noticed the sabotage. It was not an attack meant to destroy us. It was a message, cold and precise, meant to remind a small mechanic and his small station exactly how little protection they had without an empress on their side. We survived it, barely. But my closest friend on the station, a woman named Freya who had run our medical bay since before I was born, was badly hurt pulling people clear of a collapsing corridor. She lived, but she was never the same, and every time I looked at her afterward, I felt the weight of a choice I had made, for reasons I still believed in, and a price I had not chosen to pay. I did not blame the Empress, not really, but I stopped waiting for her to come a fourth time, because I told myself I would refuse her again anyway, and I did not think I could survive watching anyone else pay for it. 11 months passed. I rebuilt what needed rebuilding. Freya learned to walk with a cane and complained about it constantly, in the way that told me she was healing in more ways than one. Life on the station found its rhythm again, slow and ordinary, and mine. Then one evening, the alarm on my wrist screamed again. I ran outside expecting warships. I ran outside expecting officers, ultimatums, maybe even an apology delivered through gritted teeth by someone who did not want to give one. Instead, I found one single shuttle, small and plain, sitting quietly in the dust exactly where the first one had landed 2 years before, and standing beside it, alone, without a single guard, without a crown, without the deep space coat that had made her look like she belonged to the stars themselves, was Vaelra. She looked smaller than I remembered, not weaker, smaller, like someone had taken a great weight off her shoulders, and she had not yet learned how to stand without it. I asked her what she wanted this time. My voice was rougher than I meant it to be. She said she was not there to offer me anything. I did not understand at first. I told her that was new for her, and she almost smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. She told me that after my third refusal, her court had grown bold. They believed her fixation on a human who would not kneel had made her weak, made her a target for anyone who wanted to challenge her rule. They had moved against her, quietly at first, then not so quietly, testing whether the woman who could not command one mechanic could still command an empire. She told me she had spent months fighting to hold her throne, not against outside enemies, but against her own council, against advisors who whispered that her interest in me was a flaw to be corrected. She told me she had won that fight. But somewhere in the middle of it, she said, she had realized something that terrified her far more than losing her throne ever could. She said she did not want the throne if the price of keeping it was becoming someone who took what she wanted instead of earning it. So she had stepped back, not fully abdicated, she explained, but handed the daily weight of rule to a council of her choosing, people she trusted, while she came here, not as an empress making an offer, just as a woman, with nothing in her hands, asking if she could stay. I stood there in the dust between my dock and her shuttle, and for the first time since I had met her, I did not know what to say. She must have seen the silence for what it almost became, because she spoke again, quickly this time, like she needed to get the words out before her nerve failed her. She said she was not asking me to rule beside her. She was not asking me to save her station or fix her empire or give her an heir for the history books. She said she had nothing to give me this time. No protection, no power, no promise that her presence would not bring danger to this place again. And she understood if that meant I said no a fourth time too. But she said she could not stop coming back. She said in 300 years, no one had ever told her no, and it turned out that was not because no one disagreed with her. It was because everyone around her had learned that agreeing was safer than being honest. She said my refusals were the only truly honest words anyone had spoken to her in longer than she wanted to admit, and somewhere between the first no and the third, she had stopped wanting people who agreed with her and started wanting one person who simply chose her. I looked at her for a long time. I thought about Freya's cane, tapping against the corridor floor every morning. I thought about the debt we had paid off ourselves, hard and slow and honest. I thought about every reason I had built, brick by brick, to keep saying no. And I realized, standing there, that every single one of those reasons had been about refusing what she offered. Power, ownership, a place beneath her or beside her, but always a place defined by her title first, and by me second. This time, she was offering nothing but herself, with no title attached to it at all. Before I could answer, the sky above the station lit up, and my wrist alarm screamed for the third time that day. 2 Ascendancy cruisers dropped out of jump space, sharp and fast, nothing like the slow, deliberate arrival of her single shuttle. These were not hers. I could tell by the way Veilra's whole body went still, the way her eyes went cold and calculating in an instant. She told me, fast and low, that these were loyalists from the faction she had just defeated, the ones who believed she should never have stepped back, who believed the only way to fix what they saw as her weakness was to remove the human causing it, permanently, and drag her back to the throne whether she wanted it or not. I had about 4 seconds to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward my dock instead of her shuttle, because her shuttle was small and unarmed and sitting in the open, and my dock had something better, a station full of people who had spent years learning how to survive with nothing but their own hands and their own stubbornness. We ran through the corridors while alarms turned the whole station into a single, focused organism. Freya met us halfway, cane in one hand and a signal jammer in the other, because apparently a medic who nearly died defending this place had also quietly learned engineering in her recovery time, and she did not ask a single question about why the Empress of the Ascendancy was suddenly running through our halls. She just started shouting orders, and people listened, because that is what happens on a station built by people who trust each other. The cruisers could not simply blast a Concord station without triggering a diplomatic disaster that not even a rogue faction wanted, so instead, they sent boarding teams, fast and quiet, trying to take Veilra before word spread that they had acted at all. What they did not expect was a station full of ordinary people who had spent 2 years learning exactly how little they liked being told what to do by anyone with a bigger ship. We used everything we had. Freya's jammer scrambled their communications long enough to confuse their formation. Dock workers used cargo loaders never designed for combat to block corridors and slow their advance. I led Veilra through maintenance tunnels I had mapped in my own head since childhood, tunnels no outside force could ever memorize in time, while behind us, my neighbors, my friends, people who owed her nothing at all, fought to buy us every extra minute they could. At one point, cornered in a narrow passage with 2 boarding officers closing in, Veilra turned to face them herself, drawing herself up with the kind of authority that came from 300 years of command, and told them plainly that she had not asked to be rescued and did not need to be. I told her that was not the point. I told her this was not a rescue owed to an empress. It was something owed between people who had chosen each other, and I had chosen, and so had every person on this station, fighting right alongside me, and she did not get to refuse that, the way she had once made me refuse things too. She looked at me like I had said something that rearranged everything she understood about power. We reached the old reactor control room, just as station security, backed by half the dock crew, armed with whatever tools were closest to hand, finally cornered the last of the boarding team and forced their surrender, without a single life lost on either side. Word had already reached her new council through the jammed but not entirely silenced channels, and within the hour, a proper ascendancy response fleet arrived, not to attack, but to formally arrest the officers who had acted without her authority. By the time the station finally fell quiet again, dawn was breaking over the docking bay, pale and ordinary, like nothing enormous had happened at all. Vailra stood beside me in the wreckage of a fight that should never have been mine to join, and asked, quietly, why I had chosen to protect her when I had refused her 3 times already. I told her the truth. I told her that refusing her 3 times had never been about refusing her. It had been about refusing to be taken, refusing to be owned, refusing to become smaller in order to fit inside someone else's bigger story. But she had come here today with nothing to offer and everything to lose, and had asked only to stay, and that was not a taking at all. That was a giving, and a man can spend his whole life refusing to be taken and still choose, freely, to give something in return. She asked if that meant I was finally saying yes. I told her I had never once needed to say yes, and I never would, because yes was the wrong word for what this was. Yes belonged to offers and thrones and titles. This was something smaller and steadier than that. I told her she could stay, if staying was truly all she wanted, with no throne waiting behind her, and no crown between us, just an ordinary station, and an ordinary life, and an empress learning, for the first time in 300 years, how to simply belong somewhere, instead of ruling it. She did not answer with words. She simply stood there in the pale morning light, beside a mechanic on a nameless station at the edge of nowhere, and did not turn to leave. Weeks later, when people asked around the station what had happened, what had finally changed after 3 refusals that nearly cost us everything, I told them the truth as simply as I could. I never said yes to her, not once, in all the years since. And I never will, because yes was never what she needed from me, and it was never what I needed to give. She just stopped leaving, and somehow, that turned out to be the only answer either of us had been waiting for all along.